Independence Reformed Bible Church, we we always give an opportunity to roast the preacher after the sermon. So we'll take questions from the floor. If there are any questions, anybody has any questions at all about time? As if I can answer all. Are there any questions? Sure.
You mentioned one of the purposes of the Sabbath is to stop and evaluate our progress in God's purposes.
Yes.
And also stop and evaluate our sanctification. Do you have any examples in your life practically that would look like, or just thoughts, comments on that?
The question was, do I have any thoughts on what progress and or sanctification look like for the celebration of it in the Sabbath?
Yeah, what it looks like to stop and
What it looks like to stop and celebrate at the wonder of it.
yeah, and evaluate that.
And that's just kind of it. It's prayer, it's thanksgiving for me. And I still marvel that God would call me out at 40 years of age. You know, I had no desire to do the Christian thing. It just, you know, I'd been raised in a church. I grew up in a UCC church, and I learned to sing hymns. And kind of what ended up bringing me back were the hymns. For those of you who have never heard that testimony, I was driving to work every day, and I was casting about the radio and heard hymns. And I was living a pagan life, but I had grown up singing hymns, and I love hymns. I love the harmonies in them, and I thought, well, I'll just stay on this channel for a little while. And the preacher came on after the hymns, and I found myself day after day timing my drive to hear the preacher and not hymns. And that's how God worked to bring me back to my senses, or to my senses, not back, but to my senses. So how does it work to celebrate? It works the Sabbath rest to take some time and put it aside to ponder on the things that God has done for me. That's what it looks like. How have I progressed? Well, I give thanks regularly for this church. This is such an encouragement to Joel and me that you can't imagine that we found a body of like-minded believers who want to worship in the same way that we wanted to. That's a constant source of joy, but progress. You know, we moved from the fire company to here. That's a progress. Now, ongoing sanctification, that's just, you know, what do I see in myself? And something like that introspection, for me, I've got to be very careful that I don't descend into a self-praise. You know, congratulating myself on what a good boy I am. It's more along the lines of, for me anyway, it's a recognition, almost a surprise, that I would have a godly thought automatically. That happens, you know, every once in a while I catch myself, gosh, that was right. I should have thought that way. That's a tremendous reminder for me. And for me, then I'll kind of hold on to that, celebrate that as I'm taking my day, as I'm taking my Sabbath rest. Now, the Sabbath is a topic that we should probably really get into here at some point. If we can ever finish eschatology, maybe we'll wade into the Sabbath. Because, you know, what constitutes a Sabbath? You've got your first day, seventh day issues. You've got the issues of what does that actually look like? Does it have to be a 24-hour contiguous day Sabbath, or can you have a Sabbath rest ongoing? You know, that's a whole other discussion. But when I'm resting in God, when I'm wrestling with God in prayer, these are the things that I'm thinking. hope that answers. Wes?
I have a question about Genesis 1:1 where it says, "And before, and God hovered over the face of the waters." So do you think the water, what does that mean to you? Or, I mean, there's a lot of interpretation there, but did the water exist before God started creating?
Well, in the beginning, he created the heavens and the earth, and the Spirit of the Lord hovered over. So that must have happened in that creation. I've never given that.
Okay.
As we've had a discussion about this, I have my own struggles with six-day creationism. I had to fight with that a lot. Probably coming over to that as we go, because I can't fight against the word. But I've never paid a lot of attention because of my position of an old earth. I never paid a lot of attention to the specifics of what happened on which exact day, because for me it was more allegorical, and that it was enough for me that God created it. It didn't matter to me that he did it in 6 24-hour days, or as we've talked about a little bit here today, was time different? Has time, the time that we know as a 24-hour day, is that corrupted time? Because all of creation has been subjected to futility, it's been corrupted. What was that day? So I go back and forth on that, but as far as the actual, when was the water? For me, it has to have been created at the beginning with heavens and earth. So there's always the question about the water above, the water below. That was released at the flood. I don't have ready answers to that. Is there a question from the speaker? Oh, hang on. We have a mic.
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Thanks, Ian.
this isn't necessarily a question as much as maybe a clarification. Early on, we were talking about a right view of time and not idolizing it.
Yes.
In kind of phrases like time heals all ills
Yes.
and
With time,
repeating the
that's
past, so forth. Just for the clarification so that people don't take it wrongly. It doesn't always have to be an idolatrous use of time to say those things, because time is like a tool. It's one of the
Yes.
tools that God uses to heal wounds. And
Right.
it'd be like, it's the equivalent of saying that the medicine is what heals me. But it is God that's healing you, but he uses means
Right.
toward that end.
It's,
So it might be a good,
yes, and a fair point. Ian's point is that it's not always wrong to use these metaphors and these sayings, like time heals all wounds, or give it enough time and it's possible. It can be idolatrous, but it is an idolatrous use of the terms, and there are many, many people who take that as a gospel, as a, that's my thinking. And we reinforce that by using that carelessly. So we should be careful on how we use those terms. I will probably say those things at some time or another, right? In writing or in just everyday conversation, because it's a habit, and it kind of gets to a point. It does get to a point that you're trying to make. But this has been a very convicting study for me to say, oh, well, time doesn't actually heal the wound. Only God's going to heal that wound over time. Right. And so I need to be a little bit more clear when I'm speaking to someone who may not be a Christian. If I say, well, time will heal that wound, I should be more careful than saying that and reinforcing for him what is an idol. And being much more clear to say, God will heal that wound over time. And just be more precise. So, but it's a good point to say that if we're talking to Christians, and we are Christians, using that phrase doesn't mean that we're now idolizing time. Yeah, it's not necessarily falling into a sin. Yeah. Jim?
I hope this isn't too far off the subject, but it's something I've often wondered about. The divisions of time that we use, there's 365 days in a year, and that's derived from God's creation, the way He set up the solar system. Then we have 24 hours in a day, 60 minutes in an hour, and you can see those things in nature, but what parts of that are arbitrary and what parts of it are created? Do you have any?
Okay. Question being, what measurements of time are arbitrary, man-made, and which were set out in God's purposes? As you mentioned, and I don't have a full answer for this. I will give you my ideas on. I agree that the 365 days in a year, that's part of how God created, and so obviously we can mark that off as part of creation. Seventh day is revelation. Seventh, the 1 and 7 is revealed. And it's very interesting that in France, after or during the French Revolution, they tried to go to 10-day weeks and try to put things on a decimal type system. And no matter how fervent the revolutionary, nobody could do it. It seems to be, even though it's a revelation, it seems to be so ingrained in our nature now that we see that. As far as the calendars and things like that, you know, the Jews mark things off by the lunar cycles as opposed to the calendars that we have. But they were celebrating festivals based on the lunar cycles. We now date things according to the Gregorian calendar, which is right. That may be more artificial than what it needs to be. On the other hand, it estimates 365 days very, very nicely. And I don't suppose we'll be changing that anytime soon. Once you get into seconds and nanoseconds and things like that, I suppose you're getting into artificial divisions, but I don't know that. It would not surprise me at all. We have circadian rhythms, you know, people's biological rhythms that would appear to correspond to the day. Are there cellular rhythms that take place? Are there things that happen in cells that happen on a regularity that would correspond to seconds or minutes or time measurements that we have? I don't know. That wouldn't surprise me as we delve into it more closely. But so no, I'm not really prepared. I don't have a firm answer on what's artificial and what's God-given. Interesting question.
That stuff is fascinating.
Yeah, it is. But it's probably more a historical study than a biblical study. It'd be very interesting though to see where it comes up in God's creation. Okay. Any other questions? All right. Well, let's open our hymnals. We've got